Hello, Steelers fans. Welcome to this latest edition of the All Steelers Talk Midweek Report. I'm your host, Stephen Thompson, and we are here to run down the week that was in Steelers football and the week that is still to come. No shortage of news. We'll usually do, and like everyone has been talking about throughout this week, we start with Kenny Pickett's injury. 2 concussions sustained in the past 8 weeks, the latest coming in the first quarter against the Ravens, or the first half against the Ravens. Mike Tomlin said this week that his status for Sunday against Carolina is unknown. They're still working through the protocols. Kenny's got to, as a full participant, if he wants to get back onto the field, in addition to clearing, he has to go through to leave it in a few words before that he can take the field on Sunday against the Panthers. He did practice today as a limited participant, but in the meantime, Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph both split first-team reps as they kind of prepare for a potential game without Kenny as the starting quarterback. It's a bit of an interesting dynamic. Mitch Trubisky has been really left this entire year. He hasn't really done much at all, and I think you could see in the things that Mitch said today in the locker room when he was he's a little teased off or PO'd by getting dragged through the kind of you could call it a faux quarterback competition at training camp, and then having to go through this thing again. I mean, you just look at what he's done this season, but more importantly, what he hasn't done this season. This seems like they're setting him up for another kind of fake out of their opponent. They're leading Mason on as a serious candidate to start when it doesn't really look like it's in the picture. But according to Mike Tomlin, they're both in the mix in the fold to start against Carolina. They'll battle it out, and we'll see who is under center to start that game. It's still up in the air. I mean, Kenny still could play too. So there's a lot more that will come to light as we get closer to game time. Right now, there's not a lot really to say other than the fact that Kenny did participate in practice today. He was in pads and he did throw, but it does not sound like he did much as go. We'll move to the rest of the team. Some other injuries to keep an eye on. Chris Wormley is on the IR. His season is almost certainly over. He had surgery on his knee. He suffered that injury in the Ravens game. Chris is done. We'll talk about how he kind of plays into some other moves that the Steelers made this week. Elsewhere, Cameron Sutton has what's described as kind of a neck stinger. He was a limited participant today in practice. Pat Freiermuth has a foot injury, but he's expected to be fine. Mike Tomlin said they think he'll progress pretty well throughout the week and be just fine for Sunday. That's good news. He's been playing really well as of recently. Miles Jack has a groin injury. Those guys did not participate in practice. Those ones are considered, real live injuries that they'll have to manage throughout the week. There's no how they are or what these guys' status will be this weekend. Larry O also has a toe injury. That's something that's been kind of nagging. It hasn't kept him out of a game so far this year, but it's something he's been dealing with for the past few weeks. We'll see how that plays out. It's kind of important if that Larry O is there. The Steelers are getting progressively thinner along the front seven and that defensive line in particular. We talked a little bit on our podcast earlier today, Noah and I, on the live stream about the defensive line and about how TJ Watt kind of looks. He does not look like himself. He's clearly in pain, playing through that pain, but it's limiting his play, quite honestly. So, having Larry O in there is going to be really important. It seems like he's kind of in the same boat as Freiermuth, where it is an injury. It is going to hold him back, but they expect him to progress pretty well by the time the week is over. We move on to some other moves that the Steelers made this week. They signed two players to their practice squad. The first is a familiar face, Ola Adonai. He's an outside linebacker who comes to them by way of Tennessee, former practice squad guy. A few years ago, he was a preseason star. People kind of thought he was the next big thing. Maybe not next big thing, but next big thing as far as reserves go, but just someone who could be a contributor to this team in some kind of role, but it never really panned out. So he's back. He was at the facility today, kind of a late arrival. I don't think he practiced today. He did show up a little late, but he was there. He was spotted at the facility. Will wear number 54 he is number 54 in your program. He was pretty productive in Tennessee as far as, practice squad linebackers go. He, I believe, had played in 19 games for the Tennessee Titans over the last 2 seasons, 2.5 sacks, 24 tackles, kind of as a reserve linebacker and a special teamer. 32 games with the Steelers as an undrafted rookie out of Toledo. He was primarily a special teamer, recorded 25 tackles. I assume, more of that just given the injuries that they have there, but he was the first move they made. The Steelers also did add Jordan Marshall from the Jets practice squad. He is a second-year player out of Arkansas. He's a bigger guy, a true kind of nose tackle. At least that's what he told me in the locker room when he got here. At Arkansas in 34 games, 73 tackles, 11.5 for loss, a sack and a half, 2 forced fumbles. Pretty productive guy. Played just 4 games last season as a rookie for the Jets. 76 snaps and on defense and 1 special team snap, 2 tackles and a quarterback hit. This is, if you believe Noah, if you believe what we talked about on the podcast earlier this week, just given where TJ is at, these guys seem like the ones that are basically coming in to replace him. It's not, not directly, they won't be the ones taking first team snaps at all, but these are the depth guys that are going to replace everyone who kind of has to get bumped up a spot. In theory, if TJ does eventually get shut down, or if he has to take a more limited role this year, it's not something that the Steelers probably want to do either, but given the way this season has gone, given the way that the Steelers are positioned in the playoff race, and just, given the nature of TJ's injuries, and the way he's kind of had to slow down because of those injuries, these moves make sense. These moves are important for depth, and they show that the Steelers do have a contingency plan, and I think shows that they're thinking towards the future a little bit. That's all, and we can tie this all together, bring it back full circle. How quickly the Steelers, or how readily the Steelers are able to, or willing to, bring Kenny back kind of depends on severity of first and how he passes the protocols, but how much they think Kenny needs that work and how important this work is. But you've also got to think long term, and you got to think about Kenny's health after 2 concussions in 8 weeks. That's not something to play around with. Kenny, I think, is a similar of a similar build, at least mentally, as TJ. He doesn't want to be sitting on the sideline, especially if there's a chance that he could play. But you don't play around with that kind of thing, like I said, and the Steelers won't play around with that kind of thing. You can have a concussion even when the symptoms aren't super apparent to you. So even if Kenny is clamoring to play, it will ultimately come down to the medical staff, I think. They will not rush Kenny back, I'm pretty sure. I'd be willing to bet. But we have a long way to go to figure out how Kenny is feeling and how he's progressing, and how those symptoms that he got from that concussion in the Ravens game, how those kind of still affect him and how they affect his work this week. To use a Tomlinism, the participation will be their guide. So really, the more Kenny works, the more optimistic you can be about his status for Sunday. That's really what we got right now. There's a lot to figure out over the rest of the week, and there will be a lot more to come. Follow us on at allsteelers.com and at allsteelers on Twitter to keep up with our latest news surrounding this team, everything that's going to come out this week. And I will check back with you all next week. Enjoy.